Hi, we're Susanna and Brad Cooper from the Catalyst Coaching Institute, and we want to run through a topic that we get a lot of questions about, and that is the format of coaching. So both for employers and for coaches, you're wondering, well, which one's best? Do I go with face-to-face? Do I use one of these digital platforms? Do I do a telephonic type thing? So we're just going to chat about that a little bit today, and hopefully you can find a nugget in there or two to take home with you. Susanna, let's start with the one that people tend to naturally think is automatically the best one, and that's the face-to-face. Talk us through that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I think, and it actually is interesting, this whole topic. We tend to come into coaching and we think this is how it needs to be. Like, we come in with these preconceived ideas of this is how I want to do it with my practice. This is what's going to be best in terms of clients. And there's actually pros and cons to all the different ones that you mentioned.
Exactly. And we want to make that point today. So regardless of where you are right now or where you're leaning towards, we just want to get you thinking about the possibilities, not necessarily change what you're doing now.
Yeah, so the face-to-face is, of course, I would say the standard of what people tend to think of. And there are a lot of nice pieces to face-to-face. So first of all, body language. I mean, just like we're sitting here together, you see each other, you learn a lot as you're communicating, and you see body language with the other person. That can really help, I think, in kind of developing that rapport, that trust when you're connecting with another person.
Are there downsides to the face-to-face? Because obviously we're going to talk through all three. What are some of the things that maybe people haven't thought about with that?
So just like I said, the positive pieces of seeing each other. When we see each other, whether we mean to or not, we kind of make these little judgments or just assumptions. Like, we make these assumptions about somebody when we see them, particularly in person, face-to-face. So if you're the coach and I look at you and I'm like, he looks like he could go run a marathon, he's not going to relate to me. So we might run into that a little bit more when we're coaching, where our client might see a difference between us. So sometimes that may be with age, sometimes it might be male, female, sometimes it might be, like I was just talking about, like an athletic level, something like that. So it's interesting, we don't always think about that, but that can actually be just something to overcome when we're doing the face-to-face coaching.
And all of these things you can overcome. It's just that awareness allows you to come into it saying, okay, this is possible, and so. How about logistics? Are there some logistics that come into play with the face-to-face that maybe folks haven't really considered?
So that's a big piece. Like, where are you going to meet? When you're face-to-face, you have to be in a place. Mm-hmm. So if you're starting your own practice with clients, how many clients do you have? Is it worth it to be renting a space, to have a space available? It needs to be someplace where it's quiet. You feel like you can have this confidential conversation. So that's something, as well as just logistics of the client getting to you. Mm-hmm. So if you have, maybe you have a 30-minute coaching session and your client is needing to drive across town to come in and see you, have your 30 minutes, then they're driving back. Or maybe even in an employer setting, maybe they are leaving their desk and they're walking down in the office to come see you.
Sounds simple.
If you're coaching, there's another 15 minutes, right, tacked on to their leaving their desk, coming down. So kind of those transition times. So that can also be a big piece for the coach as well as for the client who's coming in for the coaching.
And then cancellations, reschedules, those kinds of things. You're there, you're in your office. So if somebody does cancel, reschedule in a face-to-face, you may have some less options available to then fill that time with another client or other projects you might have had going on. So definitely. That's another one. Let's shift now over into telephonic. And obviously there are two types of telephonic broadly. There's the scripted call center, interrupt your day type thing. We're not talking about that. We're talking about real coaching We're talking about scheduled around the employee's convenience. We're talking about this interaction that is personalized. It just happens to be over the phone. So with that, what would be some of the considerations when it comes to the telephonic side of things?
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things that we don't always think of is there's something about being on the phone that feels there's like a safety to it, or I don't know, something about the coach. It feels like this anonymous,
The confidentiality piece.
confidential. They're not sitting there staring at you. I don't know. For some reason, a lot of times we'll find that clients will just open up when it's over the phone, like you said, when they've scheduled it. They're expecting it. It's not a break in their day.
It's a relationship. It's not some random person bugging them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and of course that builds over time, so that would be regardless of what type of setting you're in. But there is something to that over the phone that can be nice. As the coach, I think we learn to develop listening skills differently. So I think there really is an art to the coaching over the phone, because you're not reading the body language. So you are listening for pauses, changes in energy, tone of voice, silences, listening kind of for the emotion underneath. So those are things that you learn and you develop the more you do that type of coaching.
So it's almost like you're more focused because on those other things, because you can't depend on what do you see in front of you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have to. And so that's a fun thing to kind of develop as a coach.
Okay.
So, and on the flip side, in terms of logistics, a telephonic coaching session, if it's going to start at 10 a.m., it starts at 10 a.m. So that's for the client, that's for the coach as well. So kind of less of those transition times to take into account. The client, if they're at work, for example, and doing a coaching session, they're not having to necessarily leave their desk, have all that transition time. So that, is something to take into account. I will say it's, if we're talking in the corporate type setting and we're talking about someone who's in a program and doing their coaching session, it's a little easier to not answer a phone call than it is to not see the person face to face. There's something a little different with appointments with that, so that's something to take into account as well.
I'm just thinking of, we had a client that we had coached telephonically for years, and I had a chance to go up to see them with one of our coaches, and I swear, everyone, I thought I was at a family reunion. Like, this coach had never seen these clients, but she had coached them for several years, and every time we walked in a room, people would go, "Oh, Cindy, it's so good to see you." Oh, so if you decide this is the route you're going to go, but you're thinking, but that relationship, that personalization is so important, you can do that. You just need to be very focused on how to do that. But I was amazed. Like, I knew she did a good job, but literally, family reunion is not an exaggeration of what I experienced that day with the coach on that client visit. So anyway, okay, so let's move in. Was there anything else on the telephonic side you wanted to touch on?
Only other piece is, again, just the ease for the coach, in that you can schedule your clients whenever you want. It can be a very nice way to work around just kind of work-life balance for you as a coach. You can go do a workout, you can come back in, and then you could do a coaching session, for example. It's a little different than getting ready for your day, going into the office, commuting, right, doing that type of thing. So I would say that those are other benefits to some type of a telephonic type session.
Well, and you're obviously not limited, whether it's weather or something else going on where you can't get to the office or they can't get to you. Right. It opens up that door for both you and the client that limits the likelihood that you're not going to be able to get together that day.
Right.
Okay, excellent. Let's kind of wrap up with some thoughts about the digital side of things. Now, a lot of options here, so we're not going to, by any stretch, even scratch the surface. But just generally speaking, any thoughts about the digital piece that either employers or coaches would want to think about with the coaching piece?
Yeah, we've seen it big change in the industry over probably the last 4 or 5 years with digital platforms. So when I'm saying that, what I'm talking about is more the texting, the chatting, those types of digital platforms. And what I have seen, so there's actually not a whole lot of research quite yet on kind of coaching from these platforms, but what I've seen so far is a lot depends on where the client is in their stage of change, just their readiness to meet their goals. So if they're coming in and they're in the action phase, they're like ready to go, they know what they want to do, then a coach coming alongside of them can be helpful to help them kind of just,
on a digital
platform to set their goal, to maybe connect them with some resources, to connect them back to maybe another component of a digital platform and kind of resources that they have, provide accountability. Where I've seen it not be quite as effective is if the client is in just an earlier stage of change. So kind of that contemplation, just sort of thinking about it. It's difficult to have that back and forth of coaching, of really kind of expanding the thinking, expanding the conversation that is going to happen in kind of an in-person session, a telephonic session, a synchronous back and forth conversation. So that's going to be a little different on a digital platform. So I think those are just different things to take into account from a scaling perspective. Of course, anything, when you're coaching and you're doing it from more of a digital platform, can coach more people. It's, less time in the interactions. Typically, again, could do that from whenever. So those are some things to take into account.
Okay. Very good. Anything else on any of the three that we might have missed as we went through it? I think that gives them a good baseline.
Maybe try multiple options, maybe integrate. I think if you have the ability yourself to, you're setting up your own clients, maybe you take the best of both worlds. Maybe you meet face to face, for example, initially, and then you transition into a telephonic type setting, depending on how you're kind of working out payment and packages and pricing and what the client wants, what their type of goal is that they're looking for. I think all those things can play into what's going to be best. And then even maybe ask the client. Certain clients may appreciate certain things better.
Good. Excellent. Well, hopefully this is helpful. We'd love to hear in your comments down below if there are things that you've tried or your experiences with one or more of these different formats. And obviously always any other topics you'd like us to cover. Our goal is to provide as many helpful tools and resources for you as coaches or future coaches here on the YouTube coaching channel. But your feedback helps us to dial that in the way that is most helpful for you. So please subscribe down below if you haven't already. Let us know in the comments section if there are topics you would like us to cover, as well as I mentioned, what has your experience been with this? So with that, we will sign out from here. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you soon here on the YouTube coaching channel.